Okay, good afternoon. How are we all? Thanks for your time and thanks for coming along today. Today we've got Pip Weideman from Elbit Systems of Australia. Elbit's one of the new partners with ACS here in Queensland, and we partnered with them for a specific reason around how we can help develop cybersecurity skills. And we'll go through a little bit about what Elbit does and why we've partnered with them and some of the opportunities for members later on. But today, really, it's about understanding the cybersecurity skills gap, where there might be opportunities for yourself, what's happening in the industry and in the sector nationally as well as in Queensland. So it's really about outlining some of the different things that are being done across Australia. And we'll also dive into the opportunities to move into this role. I think that's really critical because right now there's a bit of a challenge to transition, and we're looking at ways with Elbit that we can assist in that regard. So on that note, look, I'd love to hand over to you, Pip, and welcome to today. Thanks for your time.
Thanks very much, Ross, and hello to everybody. Thanks very much for tuning in. Look, there are any number of burning issues in the cybersecurity ecosystem that need to be addressed in order for this country of ours to really step confidently into the future as a leader in the digital economy. Many of them are technical, some are legal and regulatory, and many of the remainder fall into the awareness and education fields. But the one I'm speaking about today goes to the core of who we need and how we need to get them. It's a problem that spans the entire world, not just Australia. A recent report done by PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, for the Department of Education and Training late in 2017 stated that in Australia, 88% of businesses believe that there is a significant shortage of cybersecurity professionals in the country, and that the continued skills shortage could leave organisations more vulnerable to cyber attacks. So this is the problem that's colloquially described as the cyber skills gap. So what is it, this so-called cyber skills gap? Why is it an issue? What does it mean for us as individuals, businesses and government in Australia? What are some of the means of fixing it? And finally, why am I talking to you about this? I'm going to kick off first with a little bit of data and some statistics about people in cybersecurity, and then I'll go over some of those other questions. So the first question I'm usually asked when I start talking about the cyber skills gap is, what is cyber skills? What are cyber skills? It's a great question, and one that a variety of organisations around the country, around the world, are trying to come to grips with, including our own Australian Computer Society. And I'm sure that many of you listening in will have looked at the cyber specialisms published by the ACS, which you can see up on the screen just at the moment, one of. If you haven't had a look at those, you can go and have a look at them on the ACS website. So let's go through and have just a quick look at that first to give us a bit of a basis for the rest of our conversation. All right. So what we've got up here at the moment is what the ACS considers you need to be in order to be considered an ACS cybersecurity professional. A person needs to be able to demonstrate in-depth capability in one of four of the following. I'm not going to read through all of those. You can read them off yourself, but you need to be able to do these at least a SOPHIA level 5, which is the Ensure Advise level. I don't know if you're familiar with SOPHIA as the skills framework for the information age, but it's something that describes skills required by professionals in roles involving ICT, used around the world fairly widely, including by many governments to define their ICT skills framework. Just down there you can see, if you're interested in having a bit more of a look, the website you can go and have a look at to review the SOPHIA framework. In comparison to a cybersecurity certified professional, you might look at being a certified technologist, which requires a slightly lower level across a fractionally different set of particular skills, which you can see there, that range from information management all the way down to incident management, security administration and conformance review. And these are at a SOPHIA level 3, which are the ones, it's the application level as opposed to the Ensure management level of the previous slide. So you can see from those that the skills cover a fairly wide range of what's needed across the cybersecurity field. The PwC report that I referred to earlier describes it a little bit differently. It talks about the critical shortage of cybersecurity professionals and outlines what the cyber skills are that are needed. So this slide here shows you a direct quote from that report. It first outlines what the skills shortage is and a high-level statement about the drivers of that. points in particular to increased connectivity, rapid pace of change, and referencing, although not explicitly, the converging attack surface between IT, IoT, and to which I would also add OT, or operational technologies. These are our industrial control systems, sensors and switches that underpin a large part of our critical infrastructures. It then goes on to describe at a high level the cyber skills that are needed. As you can see, these descriptors generally include the specifics that were spelt out in the ACS specialisms that we looked at in the previous two slides. These are just an example of any number of sources that seek to describe what cybersecurity skills are, some going into more or less levels of detail. What is clear, though, is that cybersecurity is a broad industry that's multidisciplinary. It covers not just the hardcore of networks, hardware, software, cryptography and coding, but also the policy and people side of things and the processes. So it's as much about the mindset as it is about technical competence. It's a combination of things aimed at preventing malicious cyber activity occurring or minimising the impact of those things that does occur. What we would generally refer to these days and what the government likes to refer to as cyber resilience. Okay, so now that we have a general understanding of what cyber skills might refer to, let's take a look at some of the statistics that show us the problem that we've got in terms of the actual cyber skills gap, the supply versus demand. This year's ISACA State of the Cybersecurity Report looked at which skills are missing and what levels of the organisation they report to. It further examined the characteristics of the security workforce and in particular looked at women's opportunities for career advancement in that field. I'll come back to women in cyber a little later on. What the ISACA report shows is that the skills gap has existed for some time, and we know that, but it continues to be a problem. The main difference now is that we actually understand what that problem is starting to look like. And it's clear that the biggest gap, or the area of greatest demand, is for skilled and technical individuals. Most importantly, and what I've got up on the slide here, is that the report points out that technical skills are very strong differentiators for job seekers in the cybersecurity market. These are so important that the report explicitly calls out the need for those with technical skills to be able to objectively prove that they can actually do cybersecurity, as opposed to just know cybersecurity. I'll come back to that a little bit later on, but it's a really important point when we start to think about how we fill the gap between what industry, government needs and what's actually being delivered into the marketplace as far as cybersecurity skills. So here are some of the figures taken directly from that ISACA State of the Security Report. I'll give you a moment to just have a bit of a quick look at those. Okay, so what we're really seeing here is the figures show that 59% of companies have unfilled cyber positions. 51% of companies took more than 3 months to fill roles when they could fill them. 26% took 6 months or more, and that a large percentage of applicants for those positions were very poorly qualified. How does this show up in the job market? It shows up like this. Here you can see some direct evidence of the problem at hand. These are some examples from SEEK that I have taken just in the last couple of weeks. I've done both searches across Queensland itself and Australia as a whole, as you can see here. So you can see that in Queensland, we're after more than 700 cyber or information security workers. I've deliberately searched for cyber or information security to cover off some of the broader descriptors of what cybersecurity covers. If you just use the word cyber, the numbers are much smaller, but it doesn't cover off the actual skills that we're looking for in totality. So you can see that Queensland itself is after more than 700 of these, whilst across the country there's about 5,500. If you look deeper at these, you'll actually see that more than 2/3 of those jobs are listed at salary levels above $100,000, with significant numbers of those above $150,000. These numbers don't include some of the other skill sets that I spoke to before, some of the things identified as specialisms by the ACS, like ICT risk managers, ICT security officers, or any of the other different ways to describe that which falls under the umbrella of cyber skills that we saw earlier. So thank you, keep that in mind, 5,500 jobs across the country right at the moment. I'll come back to that in a minute. If you actually do limit it to just cyber, you'll see regularly that there are about 500 jobs that show up across the country week in, week out, and that's been going on for about the last couple of years. So clearly we have a big supply issue here. Lots of jobs, too few qualified applicants, and a rapidly expanding attack surface. This all serves to create an ever-widening gap. So one of the things we know, we've got a gap between what we need and what we have, but do we really understand why it's a big problem? Why is the gap a big problem for us? Do we really care too much? Why is it an issue for us? For those of us running a business, doing business of government, or for those of us just trying to live our lives? I personally have a fairly simple view of this because I see technology as an enabler of the future. How we use the technology, how we build upon it, innovate with it, and how we integrate it into our lives defines what our future will actually look like. So to my mind, cybersecurity is at the fundamental core of our ability to use that technology in a very positive way for our future. And for Australia, broadly, it means that we can ensure that we can engage safely with our existing technologies in order to take advantage of the opportunities presented by it and by future technologies as we develop them. Thus, the problem of not having sufficient people with the sufficient skills in cybersecurity from a national perspective is that we will struggle to defend and protect our existing systems. And on top of that, we'll not have the skilled people to work with and develop the technologies of the future. I used to think of it as a bit of a double whammy. It was causing us that problem. But really, I now think of it as a triple whammy, for a better way of describing it. So let me explain why. In our current situation, we're always behind the wave, always struggling to keep up with what we need to do today just to continue doing the business of living, always reacting to the pressures that are brought on by others who would seek to do us harm or take advantage of us. So as I've researched and developed further in my own career, I've recognised that it's not enough just to try and keep up with today in this space, because the more connected we become, the more we create and use the ever-growing number of connected devices, the greater that attack surface becomes, which in turn opens up ever more opportunities for those who would take advantage of us or who would seek to do us harm, far more than we're actually able to cope with. So it's a bit of an arms race. And you'll hear plenty of other people talk about the cyber arms race. But it's not just between nations. It's not just between state actors. It's personal. It's between you, me, and those who would take advantage of us. But what I do want to make the point here is that I don't believe that cyber produces the opportunity to create new crimes. Crime is just crime. It's nothing new. It's just new tools that they're actually using to get to us. New tools that are being used to commit them, tools that we're not quite as on top of as we need to. Which is why I thought this cartoon was a little bit appropriate for us. It shows us exactly the point. People can and do all of this crime in the real world. It's just that the connected digital virtual environment at the moment is easier for them because we haven't quite learned how to live securely in that space. And this is at the core of why the cyber skills gap is a problem. So in my previous role, I was working with a special advisor to the Prime Minister on cybersecurity, Alastair McGibbon, and he liked to describe the problem with a bit of a diagram that looks a little bit like this. It's a simple comparison between a linear and logarithmic relationship. It attempts to show that despite our advances in cybersecurity, the attack surface and criminal innovation are growing and growing at a greater pace than our advances, leaving us further and further behind as time goes on. It's not my intent here to build more fear into the cybersecurity conversation because there are plenty out there seeking to do that. But I think the problem is shown quite bleakly in this type of diagram. And the problem really is that we are not managing to lift that linear line up. So the gap is just getting bigger and bigger. The gap shown here now is the extent problem, a problem we're trying to address, but we're moving too slowly and we're steadily improving, but the challenge is continuing to move faster than we are, accelerating harder. So the gap's going to get wider if we don't get on with it. Putting aside all our technological prowess, our capability to innovate, if we cannot find sufficient qualified, capable people to fill the positions we have currently, how can we hope to start closing that widening gap? So that's the key question here. Some would say that we're already on the back foot, struggling to keep up with the now. And so our problem is that we are trying to focus on catching up, reacting to things, and this means we never quite manage to push into the future. As we saw earlier, we already find businesses struggling to get hold of qualified and experienced staff that they need to cover their security needs. So how do they go and then find staff they can allocate to them developing the next great product, the next killer app, the next thing that takes us into the future? Because at the moment, the A team, B team, and C team are so much in demand that the biggest companies with the deepest pocket paying premium prices those they consider the best, which often creates a situation where smaller companies, which is the vast majority of the Australian ecosystem, simply can't offer competitive salaries and can't attract and retain their talent. In fact, government has exactly the same problem, both federal and state and territory. It gets even worse when talent is lured overseas by big salaries and Australia loses them entirely. The high-tech field has been suffering this for some time, of course. Cybersecurity is just the current problem space. I would imagine, I wouldn't imagine, I know, for those individuals already in the field, it seems like a great position to be in. You know, you can be in demand, you can command big salaries. The problem is you're finding yourself in a space where there's more to be done that can never be done. The pressures are huge. It's often a thankless situation because, let's face it, we rarely thank people for stopping things from happening, but we'll sure tell them when they don't manage to stop things from happening. So if you're putting an effort into doing a great job of setting things up so that bad situations just never occur, you're not likely to get thanked for it. Fortunately, hopefully, you're at least getting paid to do that work. But the problem is these sorts of pressures also mean that people are leaving cybersecurity, which adds yet again to the problem of the skills gap. Study after study shows us the key reason that people are leaving is because of burnout, amusingly or interestingly, because of lack of career advancement, and also an industry culture. Just adds to the difficulty in getting that linear line to actually flick upwards and start closing or catching up with the gap problem. So the question is, what are the solutions? There's a lot of people going out there saying we have a problem, but they're not necessarily coming up with solutions. And there is no simple solution, because if there was one, we'd have already gotten onto it. The problem is multifaceted, and so must be any of the solutions. Our government has been working on that for some time, and I'll get back to that shortly. One of the big and most obvious ways to address it is to encourage more people who aren't currently in cyber to get into cyber. But the problem that we face is that the field is suffering through a lack of diversity, because people who are going into cyber as a general rule are the same people who have historically gone into cyber, like hires like, and we are suffering a lack of diversity, which means we have a problem in the ability to think differently, but we also have a much smaller pool of candidates than there needs to be. The cybersecurity industry currently is made up in general terms of a large number of very similar individuals, and we see this most obviously when we go to cybersecurity conferences and look at the makeup of the panels and look at the makeup of the presenters. One example of this, and it's only one example, is of the lack of diversity, is the huge untapped resource just in the female population. So despite being 50% of the population, we only make up, as women, only 10 to 11% of the cybersecurity workforce across the globe. Imagine how much of that skills gap we could fill if we could just quadruple the number of women interested in joining the field and balance those numbers. One new research report has suggested that the numbers may have risen to 20%, but it is a singular report out of many, so I don't know quite how well those numbers stand up. If you think back to the numbers we spoke of before, looking at SEEK, if we've got 5,500 jobs going across the country, only 550 of those are likely to be filled by women, assuming they can be filled at all. If 59% of employers say they can't fill the jobs, as ISACA told us was the case, then that means of those 5,500 jobs, only about 2,500 actually will be filled, leaving 3,000 vacant. If we could raise the numbers of women available for cybersecurity roles to 50% rather than the current 10%, we'd have an extra 2,000 more people to fill those jobs. I've used pretty rough maths there, but you get the picture. What it does show, though, is that while it won't cover the whole gap, because there's still likely to be about 1,000 unfilled jobs, it would go a long way towards it. And that linear line that we saw earlier would start to curve upwards, closing the gap rather than leaving it to widen further. If we tap into other parts of the community that are not represented in the cybersecurity workforce, we could get a lot closer to that again. It's not just about gender diversity. I only use that as an obvious example. We need to broaden the possible candidate base and get different ways of thinking in to enhance our innovation and to solve the problems that we have in this space. So how might we address the issue of lack of diversity? An article in Forbes earlier this year pointed to a greater need for visual and written representation of underrepresented groups in cybersecurity across all aspects of media and society. It stated that to find strong role models, female role models in particular, we need to amplify their voices. News outlets should stop citing only male experts. Industry conferences should include more female speakers and demonstrate their commitment to inclusive codes of conduct. The talk shows should reach out to more female experts. Many organisations aimed at getting more girls into cybersecurity will tell you that if girls don't see it, they won't be it. So women must be visible. They must be seen as experts in the field. Unfortunately, as is often the case, when women are contacted for their expertise and their insights, it's often on gender issues. And I understand the irony that I'm actually talking about just exactly that right at this moment. But they talk about gender issues rather than their technical capabilities. So when girls see female role models, they only hear about the statistics and not the cool work that women are actually doing in cybersecurity, and there is a lot of that. But we're not seeing those people get out there too much yet and show their talent to the world. Making it personal, it's one of the reasons I have made an effort to get out and put myself in the public eye. Doing what I'm doing today, speaking at conferences, speaking on the radio, writing pieces for social media. It's my own singular effort, I suppose, to show what can be done and to be visible. Of course, the Women in Cyber effort is only one of many efforts that the Australian government and industry is making at the moment, and has been working on for the last couple of years to try and address the skills gap. And it's been through trying to work through this problem with the skills gap that's brought me to doing what I'm doing today. Why I'm working for Elbit Systems of Australia to deliver what I see as a key piece of the solution, and why I'm working with the Australian Computer Society in Queensland on this issue. I'll come back to that in a little bit. So I mentioned my previous role with the Office of the Cybersecurity Special Advisor. In that role, I was to deliver and implement the themes of the Australian cybersecurity strategy that focused on two key parts of the cybersecurity ecosystem. Those are the themes of growth and innovation and cyber smart nation, which you can see represented on the screen in front. I don't know to what extent our audience here is going to be familiar with Australia's cybersecurity strategy, but it is actually a pretty easy read. So I would commend you to pop onto the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet website and take a look if you get an opportunity, just to see and understand what it is that the federal government is doing to develop and push forward in the cybersecurity environment. Under these two themes, we were looking to drive a culture of growth in cybersecurity industry, to give Australia industry a boost that we hope will enable innovation and new technologies to sprout and grow, specifically to allow the country to become one of the leading nations for high technology. You may be familiar with AustCyber, or the Cybersecurity Growth Network. That was a key deliverable out of that part of the strategy, and they've been off and running now for about 18 months and doing great work. But underpinning that piece, the second piece you can see on the slide here, is the Cyber Smart Nation theme. Under this theme, we tackled a number of different elements, which included the Women in Cyber initiative, included setting up Australia's first officially recognised academic centres of cybersecurity excellence, and finding ways to encourage more children to undertake studies that may lead to cybersecurity careers, such as more of the STEM subjects, and also to increase the number and quality of cyber challenges, capture the flag type of things, hackathons, etc., in Australia. We focused on our flagship challenge, which was the Cybersecurity Challenge Australia, or ISACA, which is Australia's preeminent cyber challenge for university students or tertiary students. It also includes TAFE. It's happening again in August 2018, and it's one of the things I will absolutely miss about not continuing to be involved with the government work and moving into my work with Elbit. So all of these efforts are being made around the country to help Australia fill the cyber skills gap. And it's those efforts previously that have ultimately led me to where I am today. So Elbit approached me last year to come on board and work with them to offer another piece of the skills gap puzzle into the Australian cybersecurity ecosystem. And when they approached me, I immediately saw an opportunity to do something that could change the landscape, something that I couldn't actually do from inside of government, but something that I think I can help government with. And this is where I have to get a little bit commercial, so I hope you'll forgive. You see, some of the major gaps that are yet to be filled is really about between what educators are providing, the universities and TAFEs, and what industry is actually needing. I can't tell you how many times I heard as a government person from industry that the universities just simply were not providing what industry wanted as far as job-ready graduates. large and small companies alike were complaining about this, and universities were turning out well-educated, cybersecurity, knowledgeable people. But what they were turning out is what we'll term in very simple terms, people with really good book learning. But they didn't have the on-the-job experience, and they weren't ready to be deployed into an operational environment without significant on-the-job training. The problem, of course, with on-the-job training is that you need to take people offline in order to provide the trainers for the new people coming on board. If you are an industry or any organisation suffering from a lack of people to do the work that's already needed, how do you take people offline in order to provide the training that's needed to bring the new people on board? It ends up being it's the reverse of a self-licking ice cream. It's a problem that keeps growing by itself because you just simply can't take the people offline to do the work that needs to be done. So what I see is Albert's offering to kind of fix that problem. We need some on-the-job or simulation training and practice. We can't provide on-the-job training, but we can certainly provide the simulation and training and practice. So, talking very commercially now, and a couple more slides before we finish up here. Albert has an excellent cyber training range. It's an out-of-the-box capability that's easy to deploy, easy to use, manage, and easy to train. What it does is it emulates a typical network with a typical tool set and allows people with IT understanding to quickly and easily learn how to identify and respond to all types of cyber incidences and attacks, all the sorts of things that we see regularly. There are a lot of educators out there providing training, academic type training, desktop exercises, knowledge-based courses. You can go out and you can get certifications after sitting exams by studying textbooks, and some that even require hands-on, clean, targeted technical environments. But there's little on-the-job training that you can do that will really ensure that you know what to do and how to do it when the worst happens in a real and lifelike environment. If you recall earlier in this discussion, I mentioned the ISACA State of the Cybersecurity report, which pointed out the need for job seekers to actually prove objectively that they have technical cyber skills. And this is what I mean. You can go out there and you can have a CISP or a CISM, but that doesn't necessarily prove that you can do cybersecurity and respond to an attack. It proves that you know what to do. It doesn't prove that you can do what needs to be done. So what we're looking to do is to offer a capability that bridges that gap, produces hands-on, competency-trained cybersecurity experts, allowing practice and development of cyber muscle memory. If you think of your cyber people as your first responders in a cyber incident, you should then compare them to other types of first responders. Paramedics, fireys, and other first responders have one key thing in common. They practice. They need to ensure that they know exactly how to respond, what equipment to use, how it will respond, and how the rest of their team will respond in any given emergency situation. Even our military uses practice or simulation for exactly this reason. Pilots use flight simulators to ensure that they know what to do if and when the worst happens. In the same way, our cyber first responders need to practice. And I saw an opportunity to bring just this type of capability to Australia, hoping to continue on my mission to raise the cybersecurity maturity of the Australian ecosystem in so doing. So that's what drove me to what I'm doing today. So finally, I may seek your indulgence for just a few moments. I'd like to just fire up a little introductory video, and then we can have some discussion and Q&A.
Yeah, make sure you send your questions through the Q&A tab there, guys. Thanks. Is that playing on your end there, Pip? Yeah, I can't see that one yet, Pip. Yeah. Can't see that playing there. Pip, is that playing on your
Is it
end?
not working?
No. Is it playing on your end?
It is, yes. Hang on.
Okay, worst case, what we'll do, Pip, is we'll make sure we send that link out into the email with the link to the recording as well. Make sure they get a copy of that one if that's not working. I can't see it on my end either, guys. Sorry about that.
My apologies.
Technical difficulties. I do have a couple of questions though for you. Someone's a graduate and a graduate security professional with BSc in cybersecurity from Edith Cowan. Wanting to update, just wondering how would someone like who's done some study, how would they transition into a cyber role? What would you think is a pathway for that? He's got a bit of theory experience and whatnot.
Okay, so one of the key ways to engage with networking is always going to be a really important thing as you start any sort of career, particularly in technology. But cybersecurity is from my experience, a particularly interesting one in relation to that. There are plenty of jobs out there, but the jobs are often asking for, I guess, unicorns, people with all of the technology knowledge and all of the experience as well. And in some cases, industry doesn't even know what it really wants when it's asking for its cybersecurity professionals, because it often goes out asking for people with 5 years experience in things that have only been around for 2 years. So it's very difficult to just go through the process of saying, I'm going to apply for one of those jobs that I've seen on Seek. My advice to any new university graduate, or my advice would go towards those people who are a couple of years away from graduation, is to get involved in the local associations that are part of wherever it is that you are. So I can't speak specifically to what's available at Edith Cowan or in Western Australia, but I know that a number of universities have associations set up within them, whether they start as coding groups or whether they start as links into some of the broader industry associations. So the ACS probably has some sort of links there itself. As a female, you can get involved in the Australian Women in Security Network. Those sorts of networks all provide opportunities to meet with industry players and to get known and to find out what sorts of things are coming up and available. That would be the absolute best way to engage. I have also seen some very interesting and innovative approaches on LinkedIn by individuals who have provided almost video applications it's a very, I guess, a scattergun approach. You're putting it out there to whoever your particular network is, but I'm seeing some really interesting approaches made by those who are thinking very much outside the box. And the other thing would be to work out where you think you want to go, not so much what you want to do, but who you want to work for. What sort of company has the culture or is doing the things that you're excited about, and approach them directly. Put something together that says, this is who I am and this is what I'd like to be able to do with you, and approach them directly. The easiest way in is to get people to actually see you as something different from what's available otherwise. Oh, I think you're muted.
I always do that. I've got more of a comment here. Someone did analysis on cybersecurity jobs in Australia in 2016, and ANSCO descriptions did not have a job description. But recently they've introduced IT security specialists, but this does not adequately capture the skill sets of a cybersecurity professional. Thoughts on that one?
That comes back to the earlier slides that I was talking to in regards to what the ACS calls cybersecurity, what PwC calls cybersecurity, and all of the different organisations around the world are defining cybersecurity in very different ways. I'm obviously not in a position to say cybersecurity is exactly this. I can't provide that box. Yeah. What it is, though, in my view, is actually really about a mindset. So there's technical skills, but it's a mindset. It's an ability to actually start to look at technology and recognize that and when I say technology, let's talk digital and virtual rather than technology.
Yeah.
Look at the digital virtual world and recognize that we need to start living in that world in the same way that we successfully live in the physical world. So if you are a person who is growing up in any country, you're going to learn to look left and right before you cross the road as a child. Don't touch the hot things, they'll burn you, that sort of thing. We don't inherently learn that for the digital and virtual world. So if you're a person who kind of gets that and are able to translate that into something that means things for other people, whether that be at a policy level, just storytelling, if you're keen on a legal side of things, or going into what I'm interested in is the very much the technical protection side of things, then you can be in cybersecurity, because that's what it's all about. It's learning to live and operate and develop safely and securely in the digital or online or virtual world.
Okay.
In my view.
Yeah, great. And is there any knowledge groups? You're based in Canberra. Is there any knowledge groups around this in Canberra?
Knowledge groups?
Yeah, you mentioned some professional groups or networks. Is there any in Canberra that you know of? Someone just...
Yeah, so look, I'm associated obviously with the ACS, and there is quite a strong push towards being able to assist people to move into cybersecurity careers there. We have an organisation targeting veterans from the military in the first instance. It's called With You, With Me, but they're also looking at being able to operate, to transition people from various different types of careers who are otherwise underemployed. So those include students straight out of university and TAFE, who are often underemployed, those parents coming back from looking after children for several years who want to transition into a career in cybersecurity, or in fact just those who are coming out of industries that are winding back and may wish to do some training to transition across to a cybersecurity career. So that's one pathway. If you are interested in the Australian Women in Security Network, that's another one. It's quite strong, but that's across all of Australia. Okay. So every state and territory, as I understand it, I'm not entirely sure about Darwin, has some representatives from that network. And the thing about that is, whilst it does say Australia Women in Security, it's actually, there's quite a lot of men involved in it as well, because it's a networking thing. There's a little crowd that we get together with regularly called the first Thursday of the month in Canberra, different days of the month depending on which city you're in, and you can find reference to them on LinkedIn, and that's very much a social get-together of cybersecurity people, but it's all about networking, not so much the knowledge building piece.
Yeah, okay. And we've got a couple here around cyber courses and stuff, and I know we've talked about this. Look, the challenge, I suppose, is there's no formal pathway into cybersecurity, and whether you're an entry or whether you're existing in the industry, there's not a lot of pathways out there. And someone's mentioned courses. Look, the one that I've seen around at the moment is the TAFE Cert 3 and their diploma. That's probably the first formal cybersecurity focused course on the market. There are university courses, but they're not specialist cybersecurity. They're kind of generalists, from what I've known.
I would agree with that. The TAFE courses have been set up under the auspices of the Cybersecurity Growth Network, and there are a whole variety of organisations, large and small, that are associated with that. Yeah. I think it's a great initiative. So it provides a single curriculum that is shared across the entire country, so that everybody studies the same sort of thing. And it will target that particular group of people that is going in, I guess, at entry level, first responder type of cybersecurity capabilities. Of course, the universities are producing graduates with, mostly in cybersecurity, it's actually about the master's level, and they're pushing towards churning out greater numbers of PhDs in cybersecurity as well, which we absolutely need. But we're well behind the eight ball in terms of being able to provide enough graduates to actually fill all those gaps. I think there was the need to bring forward about 500 new graduates every year from a cybersecurity background. Most of the jobs that you would find going for in places like in government agencies, specifically around maybe ASD or the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, they're going to be looking for people who come out with ICT degrees and then train them in the specifics of threat hunting or investigation. So a lot of the on-the-job training is being done in business to actually fill what they're calling cybersecurity. And that's that mindset piece I was talking about. You want people who have done systems engineering, who can design a network and therefore can know how to kind of break into it or pull it apart, depending on whether you want to look at the red team side, penetration testing, or whether you're looking at the defense side of looking after a network. You want software engineers. You want all of your standard ICT capability with that overlay of security thinking.
Yeah. So what you're kind of saying, and there's a few questions similar to this, like someone's got 30 years IT experience and wants to move into it. It's about, I think, first identifying your core skills and then understanding what gaps you need to fill around those. I think that probably a really critical starting point, because unless you understand what your skill set is and how that applies to the security space, you've really got to understand the specific skills gaps, because cyber is not something you can just go and do a certain course on, and one course will fix everything. So
no, but to be fair, that's the case with any specialist.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for the person who's got 30 years in ICT, what I would say to them is go and have a good thing might be to go and have a look at the course structure that we've got on our website, because that actually defines, we've got two kind of out-of-the-box training courses, one of which starts with, it's for people who know IT but they don't know security. And it'll sort of talk to you about the sorts of things that you would be looking to be able to do. The second part of our course is that you already know cyber, and let's run you through the cyber range and see how you deal with all of the attacks. But the first week, if you like, is, okay, you understand networks, you understand routers, you understand servers. Here is the security overlay on the top of that, the policy side of it. What is it you're actually looking for? It could give you a taster, but there's plenty of information on that little bit of the website that give you some thinking about what you might need to do and might want to do. The other thing is have a look at the job ads and actually see what people are asking for when it comes to cyber capability, and ask yourself, all right, so what have I got that can actually lead into this? Because if I am a specialist in network design, then I've got something I can contribute there to protecting those networks.
Yeah.
So you got to think your way around something. It's not just about identifying what you don't have. It's what you do have that can actually be brought into the space.
Yeah.
If you're able to look at your own house and ask the question, how would I break into this house and then get out without anybody knowing I'd ever been there? And think through the many, many different ways that it's possible to do that. Well, first of all, you might surprise yourself and then scare yourself with how easy it actually is. But secondly, that's the sort of mindset you need really to be in the security space, because in order to defend something, protect something, you've got to kind of work out how it can be attacked. So that whole think like an attacker piece, which also means cocking your head to one side and going, I wonder. You need to have that mindset, your thinking, analytical, questioning mindset. And I think cybersecurity fundamentally is about that.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people out there who've been in InfoSec roles for a while who, and I'm going to get myself in strife with a few people for saying this, but who are very rigid in their application of rules. And I don't think we can do that anymore, because you've got to actually think broader and say, what is the risk? Because that's what business wants people to understand, to be able to explain to them, what are the risks that they're facing in the digital virtual world? Think like that. You can transition from just about anything into cybersecurity, I believe.
Yeah, excellent. And we've got one from Greg in regards to, he's currently a Mac CP. I'll probably answer this one for you, and wants to look at this ACS cybersecurity CP. So with this particular one, Greg, yes, you do need to be an existing certified professional to take on the specialism. You need to have worked in the role or in a cyber role for a minimum of 3 years, I think. But I think what might be best is if you can reach out to myself or one of the team here, I'll connect you with the right people and we can get you the right answer for that one and just answer any of your specific questions. And I think someone's made a comment supporting kind of what you said earlier, Pippin. You know, someone's been in security for 8 years and their biggest issue is employers not putting effort into providing opportunities for certified training because they want to retain the employees that they have and feel like training will just make the person easier to be poached.
How many times have I heard that?
And
yes.
I've heard that heaps of times, not just with cybersecurity. I've heard that across the board. So, you know, what's the best way, do you think, Pip, to show the benefits of training to an employer?
So it's going to very much depend on your actual employer. I think this is kind of a problem. I saw a little bit of a meme going around a couple of days ago, actually, which had the CFO asks the question, how am I setting my people? Training my cyber people will only set them up to be leaving, whereas the CEO is asking the same. Is noting that training my cybersecurity people will give me a better organisation. So it depends entirely on what sort of people you have running your industry. I have had this conversation many times with government organisations. They suffer from not being able to compete salary-wise with the vast majority of industry, and there are a lot of other inflexibilities that government suffers from in terms of its employment practices that mean that it cannot necessarily compete with what's on offer outside of itself. Honestly, the best thing that I think a person from inside an organisation could do, assuming that they have a relationship sufficiently with the management, is to explain to them that how they can add value to the organisation with the training, and show a level of loyalty. That it's not, prove that it's not about the money, that it's about the mission.
And in this industry, I think, you know, at the end of the day, continual professional development is critical. So whether it's within the cyberspace or any sort of space, outside of vendor-based training, businesses should be investing in their technology people around that continual professional development piece.
Absolutely. But the other thing to put on the table is, why should I stay working for an organisation that's not willing to invest in me?
Absolutely.
If I can go to another organisation that is.
Because that's the retention strategy.
Yeah. And this comes down to organisational culture, and that's going to differ all over the place. I mean, I've worked in any number of sort of military. My background is primarily defence, and then government and across the ICT policy and information security policy type of areas. It's fundamentally been a very male-dominated environment, and the military piece has kind of flowed into the culture of all that sort of thing. You have to recognise what it is you're working within and then work out how to work with it in order to change it. It's all good and well for me to say I've got any number of cuts on the back of my neck from, you know, pushing hard on making changes and things, but you've got to have the courage to do that sometimes.
Absolutely, yeah. And someone said, would knowledge of ISO 31000, this is out of my league, will that help get into security?
It will, but again, it comes down to where an organisation is in relation to its maturity against that particular ISO standard. So if an organisation is working towards accreditation or certification, I can't remember which is the appropriate word, for that particular standard, then it absolutely, the knowledge is always valuable. It gives you a broader strategic capability in terms of your thinking, because you understand how it applies in a global context.
Yeah, okay. And I suppose last one is with students just come back and said, you know, they gain a lot of theoretical knowledge, then practical in some of the university courses that they're doing, and, you know, a graduate can't compete. Do you think this university's course also is a reason behind the gap? So the fact that practical application of skills isn't being taught in universities, it's all theory, it's creating challenges for graduates to get in the industry. And it's not just in cyber, mate. This is across the board. You know, the industry wants 3 years experience. But do you think it helps that gap or helps kind of, you know, impact on that gap?
So jumping straight into the commercial answer, that's exactly why we're doing what we're doing and why we're offering what we're offering. Because yes, there is, if you think about what a university is there to do, a university is not a vocational training capability. It's not what it's designed for. And their curriculums are also several years in development. So particularly in an industry like cyber, which moves faster than any industry I've ever seen. And I used to work in biotechnology, so that was the faster one before cyber. The university curriculums are never going to be able to keep up at a theoretical level, let alone a practical level with cybersecurity. So it's a very long-winded way of saying, yes, universities delivering what they deliver in terms of their educational outcomes is part of the problem, but I think we still need that. We just need extra capability as well. And I don't believe that students should have to go out from university and then spend 6 or 12 months working for free somewhere just to get the experience they need to get a job.
Absolutely.
And that's what's happening. We've seen that happen in the US for years now, and it's starting to happen a lot in Australia as well. Personally, I don't think that's the right approach.
No,
So, and that's why I stepped out of government to offer what it is that we're offering.
And look, and I suppose that's the reason we partnered with Elbit. I met Pip and the team probably 4 months ago, and instantly I knew this was something unique that we had to get out and provide to our members. So we've partnered with Elbit for the next 12 months, and we'll be doing some events and some more webinars. You'll see some content come out, which is great. And it's all going to be educating around cybersecurity. So if you've got any thoughts or ideas around what content might be of interest, please send it through. Also, we'll be sending out a flyer either today or tomorrow around the opportunity to take part in some of the training on the range. Part of that will be either 2 to 4 or 5 day courses, but what I'd suggest is we'll send this information out, contact us here direct, and then we'll put you in touch with the right people at Elbit to make sure that you can have the right discussions and ensure that you go into the right area, and you've obviously satisfied where you need to go from a training perspective, because everyone's different. I think this requires just a little bit of a discussion with the team to make sure that the training's suitable for you. So reach out. We're happy to connect you, and we really look forward to working with Pip and the team. There's going to be some exciting stuff, and we can't wait for the rest to roll out, Pip.
Yeah, well, it's pretty exciting from our side as well. So I'm looking forward to the further collaboration, and happy to, for any of you listening today, you want to reach out to me. Ross can put you in touch, and we can have a chat if you're interested. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And just so you know, I had 2 of our leading cybersecurity members that are leading cybersecurity experts test the range for us, and they were really impressed with the quality and I suppose the training outputs that were possible. So it is very intensive and high quality training. So I hope you take advantage of this. It's a really unique opportunity, and what I suppose appealed to me is this is a first to market. You realise the only people that have trained on this range are military and government to date. So we're really proud and excited to take this to market with PIP first. And yeah, you ACS members have got the opportunity to take part. So look, don't hold back. It's a really good opportunity to get some training, and we look forward to seeing you at some future events.
All right. Do we have any final questions? Or
no, that was it. I think you had 14 today, Pip. That's a pretty good effort. No, 16, mate. That's a really good effort. So, look, I really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy lady, but yeah, we'll look forward to working with you in the future. And please, everyone, reach out and have a chat with Pip if you need.
All right. Well, thank you very much for everybody's time, and I look forward to further interactions with you down the track.
No worries. Thanks, Pip. Take care. We'll talk to you all soon. Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.